Okay, so first item on the agenda is roll call.
Okay, Schaefer here.
Here.
Sullivan.
Jones.
Jones.
Here.
Okay.
Agenda item number 1 is the ethics complaint from Lawrence Tregeser, dated 14th, which everybody received by email. Everybody had a chance to read that?
I did.
Okay, so I asked the judge executive, although the complaint is against the magistrates, when I read the rules for gifts on page 4, I think it is, of our ordinance, it says no officer of county member judge of the or agency shall directly or indirectly accept ... any gift in any form ... thing, in this case a jacket, under a circumstance that could reasonably infer that the gift was intended to influence or could be reasonably expected to influence the officer or the employee, and then there's listed exceptions. Mr. Tregeser's complaint says that the judge obtained these gifts by whatever means and then presented them at a meeting to the magistrates. I asked the judge for a letter as to what his intent was relative to that. Was he trying to bribe the fiscal court so that they would do everything that he wanted for the next 4 years by giving them a jacket or not? And he responded to that, and his words are, while I do admit to the personal purchase of the jackets of his own money, giving them to the magistrate for the reasons stated above, it's an absurd notion for any reasonable person to believe that these jackets were in any way intended to influence or for any reasonable person to infer that these jackets could reasonably be expected to influence any single one of the 5 magistrates in the performance of their duties. So I brought that letter and gave you all a copy of it because it speaks to intent, which is the nature of this ordinance. Questions on the basic information?
Good. I don't think I have a copy of that.
Which one?
Sheriff's letter, Judge?
From the judge.
Judge's letter. Give you a chance to read that. I just got taken yesterday afternoon. Thank you.
Do we want to hear?
We do, but I wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page before we did it. So, Ken, you ready? Bill, are you ready? I'd like to invite John and Mr. Tregeser to both speak on this issue if they desire.
Go ahead, Larry.
Larry?
You go ahead. I'll respond
No,
after
go
you.
ahead, Larry. You're the one. You're the complainant.
You respond.
You're the
Mr.
complainant.
Tregeser, could you please go first?
Gentlemen, you have my complaint. I think Section 5 is unambiguous. The issue at hand before you is one of 2 things. Either Section 5 doesn't specify or isn't detailed enough, because this means that it's left up to your discretion as to what can be considered persuasive, a buyout, influencing. If I offer each of you a meal out, is that enough to influence you? Is $100? Is $1,000? What about a meal once a month? What about breakfast at the teacup every day? Now, I think you're going down a road that's very dangerous. And that is to say that, well, it's just a jacket. It couldn't persuade a magistrate to do what I want him to do or to vote how I want him to vote. But we see a world in which motivation used by even with our congressmen on having trips and free food and shrimp and liquor can all persuade people to do things. The more important question is, this particular item, the coat, was found out. But what's going on behind the scenes? Now let there be no confusion. We've had illegal meetings from the previous court, and we've had illegal meetings from this standing court before they took office, but after they were elected. I believe there were as many as 5 meetings that discussed policy and conspired of what was going to happen in the future when this court actually took over. So don't tell me that simply buying the coat wouldn't potentially sway someone to be positive or sympathetic or to be open. And I think when you look at the state ethics, they stay away from anything, even $1. Because once you take that first item, you've sold your soul. And I suspect, gentlemen, at the end of the day, that if you don't rule that this is a violation, and when I take it to circuit court, I think Judge Hickman's going to rule in my favor.
And you'll get a chance to speak after the judge if you have something that you'd like to mention.
Thank you.
Judge?
All right, well, it's obvious Larry has declared war on our community. As everyone here probably knows, I'll offer a period during our meetings, the very first part of our meetings, for public comment. Our very first meeting of the new court, Larry was able to address the court, and his first words to the court were, "Welcome to the battlefield." It's obvious what the man has done. He's declared war on our community. This is just another part of that war. Even in his complaint, he refers to undercover agents, and it's almost to the point of delusional. The intent of mine purchasing these jackets, David Jenkins, as county judge in 2007, when I came on the court, presented me with one of these jackets, very similar, not identical. I thought it was a good gesture. It was a gesture of goodwill. It was a gesture of welcome to the court. It was not and did not influence my vote one way or the other. It did not. My gift to these magistrates was simply a gift of goodwill, a gift to welcome them to the court. In no way, shape, or form was it intended, or will it influence their decisions on the court. So, first of all, I'm not a party to the complaint. Evidently, the complaint is against the magistrates, but I'm going to tell you my intent, and I can't think of any one of those 5 magistrates that would in any way agree with what Larry has presented here. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I believe at the time when the coats were given earlier, the fiscal court there was a rule at that time that we could get gifts up to, I say we because I was on that court, up to $50, I believe. Is there such gift set other than what we know right here at this point?
I don't see any.
In the court? Or?
I'm not sure of your question. I mean, I don't see anything in the ethics.
No. Well,
this was a personal gift from me to these magistrates as a gesture of goodwill and welcome to the court that I think this community embraces. We're tired of the ongoing war that Larry wages in our community. We need unity on this court and goodwill amongst the court members. And that's all. This is just, again, it's another salvo in his war against the community. So.
Okay. I don't have the code at that point, but I believe we were allowed it's a $50 donation.
Didn't matter then, I mean, this is now.
Right, John brought that
now.
up, and we're looking at versus now.
Right, but as a matter in this court, it's,
I don't think
our
it's-
rates say no gift, no dollars, any gift.
But my question, John, was, is there anything that we don't see besides here that the court has done in the past, since some of us are on court, that would say they could receive a gift?
But any
But
past
most
precedent
are-
is overcome by a more recent ordinance
Right.
that says you can't receive any gift.
Right.
But I think when you read the full ordinance, where it says under circumstances in which it could be reasonably should be inferred that the gift was intended to influence.
Right.
And I can tell you, as a businessman, when I would pull a team together, a new team, the first thing I would do was give them a jacket, buy them a dinner, and say, welcome to the team, let's go together.
For team building.
Exactly. That's just common practice everywhere. I mean, could you list every single thing anybody could possibly give in an ordinance? Not a chance.
Right.
But I think the caveat here is reasonably, and I think the judge referenced that in his letter.
And the counterpoint would be, in my past life, I was a captain in the Navy and I ran a $100 million a year Navy program. And we had obviously multi-million-dollar contracts with several different defense contractors. And we were not allowed to accept anything valued over $5. And so when we'd go to a conference, all the Lockheed employees, et cetera, would all be being paid by, their meals were all paid for by the company, Lockheed Raytheon, which meant that my program office was paying for their meals because all the source of that funding was through my program. But all the Navy guys, we had to pay our own meals. And so I've seen, I agree with what you say when I was out in civilian contracting. It was more like what you're saying. There was emphasis on team building. I think Mr. Traeger's point is he doesn't want team building because then there's collusion. I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's what I infer from your document. So it's a complex thing. Is it reasonable to infer that this would influence someone? That's a key question. In my previous life, that would not have influenced me, but then I was not allowed to accept it. And you're saying you would have been allowed to accept it or give it, and it would not have influenced you. Bill? Did you want to say something else, Mr. Traeger, or?
I just wanted to add a few additional points. No disrespect, former magistrate. I believe it was up to $100, sir.
At that time?
I
It
believe.
may have been, I was thinking it may have been 100.
And I want to go back to the Bill Carr administration, which
We were not part of it.
I understand, is that I believe the Farm Bureau insurance entity came and wanted to give the magistrates a gift basket. It had eggs and sunglasses, and they stayed away from it. No one accepted it. Counselor, 67.710 specifically states, as well as 61.780. 870, both mandate that the judge is responsible for making sure that the administrative code, open meetings, open records, the ethics are provided to magistrates, commissioners, and board members to ensure that accountability and transparency is in county government. Having said this, there is no excuse why the county judge would move on this. My last statement is to you, I believe it's Mr. Schaefer.
Yes, sir.
Your wife has a contract with the county for the web service.
Okay.
Your wife was handpicked by Judge Riley and pushed to the court for that contract. I question whether or not you should even be voting on this, since it deals with John Riley.
Really?
I do.
Interesting. You don't know my wife.
To reiterate my point on the jackets, since John brought that up, was only, is there something outside what we have in front of us that states that the fiscal court could give
It wasn't the court giving, it was the judge out of his
the
own
judge?
pocket.
I said fiscal court, I meant the judge or the magistrates, or any county employee. I just wanted to make it verify there's nothing out there beyond what we're looking at. And apparently there is not, so now I know that we have to deal with what we have here.
Let me ask you a question. Would it made a difference if the judge had used county money, official county money, as a welcome?
I think it would have, and it may have, that may or may not have been legal, I don't know, but I'm sure it would make a difference. Because then it's not a gift from an individual to buy their votes, then it's county money being used as whatever.
I mean, the water department furnishes uniforms, I mean, it just,
I understand. So,
And I think that, just so you know the legal issue,
please.
that each person voting today needs in their own mind to determine, does the purchase of a jacket can that reasonably be expected to influence the magistrates in the performance of their duties?
Right.
So that's what I just think you should keep in your mind as you're determining, you know, these facts and circumstances in your decision.
And the slippery slope argument is still valid.
Well, sure,
At what point are you going to cross that line that the collection of meaningless gifts adds up to influence?
and I think that's the line you have to establish, kind of with, you know, can that reasonably be expected to influence the magistrates? And so it's a, you know, I think a car, you know, that would probably be something on the far end of absolutely that could reasonably influence my decision if I received a new automobile.
Yeah, and
So
so
then,
Mr.
on
Tragerson
the
mentioned
other
Congress, that, you know, those are multi-$1,000 vacations that are paid for by contractors. Not seeking to influence, of course, they would never do that. That's clearly what they're doing.
So
So,
perhaps at the other end, he gives everybody his business card. You know, and so is that something that you would think would reasonably influence their decision? So
so,
it's kind of a, I think with what we've got in our ethics ordinance, which is, you know, obviously we wish probably there was a financial ceiling or something more specific. But it seems like we dealt with that in the drafting of the ordinance. And I can't remember the committee's thoughts, but I think we were concerned about putting a number because the number, well, times change and
right.
we would have to be coming in, I guess, to keep raising the amount.
We selected any because we didn't want to be on that slope. I agree, that's what we talked about.
Right, so that meant none.
And then he means none. And so, you know, in terms of the elements of proof, so to speak, in section 5, was a gift given? Yes. Did the gift have any financial value? Yes. Was it accepted by the magistrates? And the answer is yes. And so the only thing that's left is, do we believe the circumstances could reasonably influence that individual?
And to speak of the slippery slope, I know in the past that there were Christmas gifts given to the public. They did not have money. They could not afford to buy the food for Thanksgiving. And when it was drawn the line, fiscal court said, we'll pay for it ourselves. So we each actually put our own money in to do it, because there were questions of that. You know, so if we're looking at jackets, you know, we're looking at paying for dinners, for Christmas, for county employees. Does this mean that, as we did years ago, and I'm forgetting for using myself as an example, but I just happened to be there. According to this ordinance today, you know, can fiscal court not make donations and give to the public?
Well, I mean, if they give to a charitable organization that's
Through a charitable organization?
that's providing meals for people, then they made a gift to a charitable organization.
Sure, that's
That's
one.
not vote buying or
But I'm
whatever.
talking about like for dinner for county employees.
Right.
You know, is that, you know,
Is it the county's
something
money?
that we could do, or, no, it's not county money, it's personal money. And so that's gonna fall under the same thing. And I'm trying to keep us from going back to another slippery slope again later.
Right.
Apparently the door is open.
The door's always open.
I don't see any ill intent. I don't think there was ill intent that I can find at this point. But I'm not the final decision maker. I can decide on what I feel and what I think. And, you know, we have to roll under what we have here today.
Okay.
So, you know, personally, I think that, you know, due to this ordinance, it was probably not a wise thing to give the gifts.
Okay.
I also do not see any ill intent, so I don't see where there should be a charge brought for that.
Okay.
But we need to make sure that fiscal court understands, until this ordinance is changed, to allow a percentage. And if they would like for us to look into that, we can look into that, and we could do that.
Some dollar amount or percentage.
The dollar amount or venue in which they could do that. But based on what I'm seeing now, it appears that the Colts probably should not have been given, even though there was not an ill intent. I'm not seeking any action in my point, other than we learn from our mistake. Even though it was an honorable mistake, it's a mistake.
Okay.
I look at it as, in some ways it's Bill, but I also believe there was no intent. I think it's team building, comes from the private sector, that's at least how I think. I don't even know if they even had a magistrate meeting before they got the jackets.
I think this was the first meeting, is that correct?
Judge, was it the first meeting that you gave them the jackets?
It was before the first meeting.
So,
And again, this
there weren't
complaint
even
is not
any
against
issues.
me.
Right, the complaint's against the magistrates,
The
but you have knowledge of
The
the
issue
details.
was, did the magistrates illegally receive these gifts and accept these gifts as a token to influence their action on the court, which is absurd.
Were they sworn in at the time that the gift was given?
The gifts, I don't recall. I know they were purchased long before they were sworn in. The intent, I mean, I was, as you know, David, I don't know, did Judge Jenkins give you one of those? Yeah, gave me one. Did you feel like you were influenced in any way by that token of goodwill?
No.
Yeah, no.
No.
No. Do you think if any of those 5 magistrates were standing here in front of you that they would acknowledge that, yes, I accepted that as a means to influence my action on the court? I think any of the 5 would say this is absurd. Again, this is another salvo in this delusional war on our community. And I think you all, the time that's wasted in all this is incredible.
One other factor, Mr. Tregus gave us a flash drive with pictures of the coats on it, but since the judge has already stipulated to their existence and he purchased them and he gave them, did anybody need to see these pictures? Maybe return your personal property. Don't see any reason why you should keep them this and keep safe somewhere. Black and white printouts. Okay, so are we ready to move to a vote? Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Ken?
I just think that your vote should be around that issue we talked about.
This issue.
Yeah, that whether or not purchase of these jackets could reasonably be expected to influence these magistrates in the performance of their duties.
But it's not the purchase, it's the acceptance of these jackets.
Correct, I'm sorry. And I'm interested also in the timing of the receipt of the gifts, because it definitely...
Well, it may matter in a legal sense, in the timing, because they weren't a magistrate, and they were a magistrate at the moment at which they did it. The matter of intended to influence, or possibly causing influence in the mind of the recipient, that doesn't make that much, it certainly makes a huge difference legally, but in terms of an ethical thing, does it,
Well, the ordinance itself reads that it's expected to influence the officer, employee, board, or commission member.
and if they're not an officer at the moment at which they do it, 12 seconds before being sworn in, they're not an officer. I agree, that makes a huge difference legally.
But I understand the point that it's...
But ethically,
Yeah.
the matter on the table is an effort being made to buy the magistrates and have the magistrates been bought. And so, I guess the way that I see it, we could require the magistrates to return the jackets or pay for them. We could tell people, don't do this again, this is what the rules are, proceed. And I lean toward the latter.
Have the
Is there a third choice?
Have the magistrates received a copy of the administrative code?
Yes.
At this point, have they received one today? At this date, have they received it?
Between the,
As far as I know, they've all received copies of the administrative code.
Okay, have they received those before the jackets were given?
That I couldn't tell you, no.
And as far as your options, I think there's also A as underneath subsection 5, which says it could also be declared to be county property or something to that effect.
Which would mean when they leave office, they have to turn them over to the next guy? They have their name on them, don't they? Judge, they have their name
That
on
could
them?
be taken off, I suppose, I don't know, depend, you know.
So choices are the county property and they have to turn them back in, and somebody's got to make a property record and maintain the auditability of that for the next several years.
Retention schedule on it, I'm sure.
Or make them return/pay for, or advise people as to the words of this section of the administrative code and tell them to observe it in the future.
I would think that's the way to go, and subject perhaps for another meeting, since it's not on the agenda, is if we want to put a dollar limit, so that we don't have this.
I think that any dollar limit creates the same problem, because if it's $25, what if somebody gave them 24? What if they gave them 26? And the reason we went to any gift was because, you know, what will influence you is dependence for English. What would influence you depends on your personal budget and net worth, as opposed to, you know, someone else might be influenced by a meal once a month. Other people would be like, hey, that's great to get me a meal once a month, but I haven't paid eating at that place. I mean, so that's why we put
There's
dollar
really
amount.
not a defined line on what influence.
And that's why we're here.
We don't know the true intent of the heart, although we think and understand people are honorable. Sometimes things are meant otherwise. Not saying this is you, John.
Well, I was in-
I'm thinking in the past. And this is where, when I first went into office, it was not unusual. And, you know, no big monetary gifts were given, but they would give gifts for Christmas or things, small things. And then as time changed, this became the norm that you did not. And then there was a cutoff that many associations and fiscal courts said, you know, we're not going to take anything, because it came to the point where you just had to not take anything.
Mhm. That was a Navy rule, that's why they had a $5 limit.
Sure. So, in my personal opinion, I do not see where there's any ill intent. I don't think there was ill intent in this. I've not received any complaint from any magistrate. I do question, first fiscal court, first meeting, how versed are they on the administrative code or the ethics, both two important items. We're talking about the ethics at this point. They may not even realize that. You know, I may have thought it's a jacket, who thinks of that? But it's a good time to say, hey, the way I read this, personally, is no gift. And we have the exceptions. And, you know, John paid for this himself, which was good, but it still doesn't allow what's written here.
Right.
So I would say that the magistrates received a gift, and I question how knowingly or unknowingly they were with the ethics policy at the time they received it. Doesn't change the situation. I think that they need to be aware of the ethics ordinance. They need to read it thoroughly, the entire ordinance, because it does affect them personally. That needs to be a part of a recommendation.
Okay, so what would the motion be?
And the motion would be that, at this point, in my opinion, there has been a gift given that possibly may not have been the right thing to do. And the order to rectify that would to be, let the magistrates know, who are the ones who are charged here in receipt, that we feel they should all have a copy of the ethics ordinance.
Okay.
Make sure they have it, Judge. If they don't, please get them one. This would be a good place to identify. There are other places that they may want to identify, but at this point, to identify this, I don't see we need to bring any charges against the magistrate or the judge, because I do not feel there was ill intent.
Okay, So how about a motion that goes something like, the Ethics Committee will send a letter to each of the magistrates. We'll provide them a copy of the ethics ordinance. We'll advise them of the specific wording of Section 5 relative to gifts. We'll explain why you do not have to return the gift that was received. It was inappropriate to receive it. Right? And that you should refrain from doing this at any point in the future.
Receiving any gifts in the future.
Exactly.
Any dollar value.
At any dollar value. Any gifts of any dollar value.
Now, if they would like to change this, then we can look into that.
And then if they desire to, they can request it.
They can come
They can
back.
request an open meeting,
Exactly.
the Ethics Committee, to discuss the matter further if they disagree.
Do I hear a second?
Is that written down?
I'll
somewhere?
second that. I know, I was working on it. Make it official.
And for any who are taking notes, we will provide a copy upon request of the minutes, so you can see the minutes and the exact letter that we're writing.
And photographs
This is
before you
good.
leave the meeting.
Yeah.
Make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay. A motion that the Ethics Committee send a letter to each of the magistrates. That informs them, one, we're going to provide a copy of the ethics ordinance, two, we're going to highlight Section 5, three, we're going to advise them that receiving the jacket was a violation of the ordinance, and four, while they do not need to return or pay for the jacket, they do need to refrain from accepting any gifts in the future.